Hello and welcome to Inside ETFs. I'm Ramzan Karmali. Today we're looking at international equity ETFs with Todd Rosenbluth, Head of Research at Vettafi. After trading their US counterparts in 2023 and 2024, international equity ETFs have surpassed their American peers so far in 2025. The last 6 weeks has seen the biggest one in this space, the Vanguard Developed Markets Index Fund ETF, VEA, perform admirably. But can it and others like this ETF continue their impressive performances this year? Well, to help answer that and more, I'm joined by Todd Rosenbluth from Vettafi. Todd, why do you think we're seeing international equity markets ETFs perform so well since the turn of the year?
Well, so part of it is how you built this up, in that we've seen underperformance for international equity and in national equity ETFs for a couple of years. They being international equity stocks have been trading at a discounted valuation. Many investors have rotated in and feeling more comfortable about the economic prospects outside of the United States. There's a lot of uncertainty going on in the US, but you're right, VEA, which is the Vanguard FTSE Developed Markets ETF, is outperforming the S&P 500 by a couple hundred basis points, and some of its peers are outperforming as well. So could we buck that trend? It certainly seems like we're starting the year on the right foot.
But how do you think things like tariffs that Donald Trump is talking about will play out for these types of ETFs? Do you have to find funds, for example, that avoid Canada?
Well, so let me come back to the can you avoid Canada in a second, but many of these ETFs hold multinational companies. And multinational companies are not just being impacted by the tariffs in their own market, but impacted by the tariffs around the world, the same way that U.S. companies are. So in the U.S., we have Apple and Microsoft that have significant operations outside the United States. Vanguard ETF VEA has Nestle, for example, as a top holding. That's a global brand that we're quite familiar with here in the United States, even though it's based in Europe. But for folks that want to understand what they have within their portfolio, looking at the country exposure is quite important. So VEA has exposure to Canada, that's the Vanguard ETF, but an ETF like IEFA, which is the iShares Core MSCI EFA ETF, the EFA is the key part of that. So it has exposure to Japan, developed Europe. It does not have exposure to Canada. So these are two very similar ETFs in concept. The fees are quite similar, but what's inside the portfolio is quite different. So if you're nervous about Canada exposure, you've got a strong alternative with IEFA.
So these types of ETFs, do you think actually investors might want to look more closely at actively managed funds rather than passive funds?
Well, yes, that's, I guess, a key point also. If you want to have underexposure to Canada because of the tariffs or to other markets that might be in the crosshairs of the United States, then an active manager can do that, both from a bottom-up selection standpoint, looking at companies that are underexposed to some of those trends, or even from a top-down standpoint where they underweight certain countries. So we're seeing a growing number of actively managed ETFs come to market. T. Rowe Price has one. The ticker is TOUS. That caught our eye at Vettafi. It has a growing history. It's outperforming this year. And then we've seen other firms like Capital Group, among others, that have expanded into this space in recent years.
It's fair to say it's been an interesting start to 2025 with the new president and his policies. So do you think international equity market ETFs will actually be able to continue this sort of impressive performance?
So I'm intrigued that we're seeing strong inflows to some of those broad market ETFs. I mentioned VEA, iShares ETF is having some success. State Street is having success. Investors are embracing international equity ETFs and reducing that underweighted exposure. We've had 4 out of the last 5 calendar years where the developed market ETF has underperformed the S&P 500. I think this year could be different, but we'll see how the rest of the year plays out. We've got a lot of drama to work through in the United States.
That was Todd Rosenbluth from Vettafi. And that was your look at international equity ETFs. I'm Ramzan Karmali, and this is Reuters.